Hello everyone, and welcome to the GTAC Tech Talk webinar on AutoVu fixed camera deployment in Security Center. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Derek. I'm a technical training e-content specialist with Genetec, and I'll be presenting the webinar for you today. We also have some members of the Genetec Technical Assistance Center standing by who are assisting with the webinar questions and answers. Our first GTAC expert is Patrick, who is one of our technical support specialists with the AutoVu team. And we also have Patrice with us today to help with questions. Patrice is the GTAC's technical support representative in charge of testing. If you have any questions during the webinar, you can just type them in the GoToWebinar question box in the console here, and one of us will get back to you with an answer as soon as possible. In case we need to verify any information for your question, we'll make a note of it and we'll get back to you via email as soon as we have an answer for you. All the questions and answers from the webinar will be posted on the GTAC Tech Talk section of the Genetec Technical Assistance Portal forums about a day or two after the webinar has finished. If you have any additional questions or comments on the webinar or on the GTAC Tech Talk webinar series in general, you can post them in this section of the GTAP forum as well. All the videos of the previous webinars can be found by going to the Resources section. This has been renamed recently. And then we go to Videos, and then we click on the GTAC Tech Talk section on the left here. Now there's two ways that you can watch these videos. Either streaming in a web browser by clicking on this icon right here, or you can download a zipped Windows media file by clicking on the second icon right here. If you'd like to receive emails concerning the latest additions to the Genetec Technical Assistance Portal, you can log into the GTAP, go to the My Account section, and go under Email and Notifications. Now from the Notifications section below here, you can check on the boxes of the subjects you're interested in and select how often you would like to receive an email when there have been additions to any of these sections. To put a check next to a subject, the frequency will have to be set to daily or weekly, otherwise the options below here will be grayed out. You can also edit your subscription to our two Genetec newsletters in the email subscription section from the same page. Now don't forget you need to hit the submit button on the bottom to save your changes. Now let's just take a minute to go over the goals of the webinar today and see what we want to get out of it. Our primary purpose for the webinar is to give you a good idea of the basic steps required to set up a fixed Sharp AutoVu system. Now we don't have time to cover every setup and option, but for anything we don't cover, we can take a look in the AutoVu handbook, the Security Center Administrator Guide, and the various other hardware guides that we have available. Some hardware will be covered, including the differences between the two major types of Sharp systems and the most common wiring scenario. We're going to talk about the Sharp configuration and how to set it up for a basic fixed system, and we'll also look at the Security Center side for the LPR Manager role. Now we're going to assume everyone here has a good basic knowledge of Security Center, and we're just going to focus on the one role type basically. Now moving on to the agenda, the first thing we're going to do is have a look at a brief introduction to the AutoVu system and the hardware and what it can do for you. We're going to cover the pre-installation steps following that and discuss the site survey, the camera position, network ports, and other important information you need to know before getting started. Now of course, before we go into the software side of things, we'll take a look at the hardware and how to install it. This is where we're going to see a wiring example and the differences between the two units. Now at this point here is where we're going to install Security Center if we haven't done so already, but we're not going to cover that part, so I don't really have it listed here on the agenda. Once we do have the hardware installed and Security Center installed as well, we'll take a look at the software side on the Sharp and basically what we need to do to configure it for a fixed system. Switching over to the Security Center side, we're going to set up the LPR Manager role next and add the context camera in the video side as well. The last configuration step is to set up the hot list we want to use with our Sharp cameras in case there are specific plates that we are looking for. And of course, in case things don't quite go as planned, we've got some good tips concerning troubleshooting any common issues that might come up during the setup process or while you're using your Sharp system. Now, one new thing that we're trying here, if you take a look on the side of the slides here, you'll see the table of contents, and we've also got a progress marker here. So if you need to go back and review the video once we have it posted, this will really help you locate the section you're interested in if you need to skim through the video. This is also good while you're watching just to see what step we're at as well. Now, we're going to focus mostly on the configuration of a fixed AutoVu system, and we're assuming everyone has some kind of security center knowledge, but I do want to take a minute just to go over the components of the AutoVu system and introduce a few terms that we're going to be using today. The AutoVu LPR system is used for identifying, reading, and comparing license plates with various plate lists that are stored in the security center system. The key components are the Sharp LPR hardware, the LPR Manager role in Security Center, and of course our hot lists as well. Now, when we talk about Sharp cameras, we aren't referring to a particular brand name, but these are the specific cameras that have been designed and built by Genetec. The Sharp camera system separates the plate image processing from the Security Center system and just sends back the information needed to determine if the plate read is on one of the plate lists. AutoVu can be used in both fixed and mobile scenarios. In a fixed system, the Sharp camera system communicates directly with the LPR Manager role on the Security Center system, and the LPR Manager determines if the plate being read belongs to one of the selected lists. On a mobile system, the Sharp camera system talks to the Patroller application, which is running on a touchscreen-enabled PC inside the vehicle. The Patroller determines if the plate is on one of the lists and takes the appropriate action. The data collected by the Patroller will then be sent to the Security Center system, either in real time if it has a wireless connection, or at the end of its shift. In the webinar today, we're only going to be looking at setting up a fixed AutoVu installation. Fixed AutoVu cameras can be set up on a pole, an overpass, or some other stationary location. We can use these to monitor access to a particular roadway or gate, and can even be configured as part of a gate system to automatically open if the plate is recognized. The list of plates that are used by the LPR Manager are called hot lists, and if a plate is matched with one of the plates in the hot list, we call this a hit. So in our example here, we have our reads that are coming in from the Sharp camera, and we have our hot lists, and we can see that two of them have come up and are considered hits. Sharp cameras contain both an LPR camera for reading the plates using different wavelengths of light. The light is provided by the illumination board, which are these small lights on the front here, and also contains a standard camera for recording the image of the car and its environment when a plate is read. So a plate read contains the context image, it contains the image of the plate, and the interpreted plate number here as well. This is fed to the LPR Manager and can be displayed on the Security Desk application. Now, the context camera here can also be viewed like a normal Security Center video unit. When a match is made and we get a hit, the Security Center system can be configured to do many things like activating an alarm or trigger an output relay as well in cases where you do have it set up to a gate. Okay, so there's a few things that we have to take care of before we get into the actual setup and configuration, and even before the system is ordered from Genetec. So one of the most important steps to do is to complete a site survey. In order to get the best plate reading performance, the LPR camera installed on a Sharp unit is customized for the actual location the Sharp will be installed in. We get this information from the site survey, and then the appropriate camera lens and illumination boards are selected. Some of the critical information in the site survey is how high the fixed Sharp will be mounted, how far the camera will be from the plates it's trying to read, and what types of plates will be read. Another thing to bear in mind when doing the site survey is the location of the camera. The camera should be mounted in a place where we can get the best angle to read the plate. So as we can see from the two diagrams here, the reading angle of the plate should be within 30 degrees of horizontal for the height, and should be within 50 degrees from the back of the vehicle on each side. For the best results, try to get the camera as clear a line of sight as possible to the plate. So if it's too low or it's too centered, it may cause problems if there are other cars that may block the plate. If at some point the camera is relocated, the Sharp may need to be sent back to Genetec to have a new lens installed and calibrated. Let's take a look at that with a quick example here. So here we have two different Sharps. We have a 12mm and a 35mm lensed Sharp. Now if we know the plates will be passing somewhere around 14 feet from the camera, we're going to want to use the 12mm lens. We know that there's a in-focus range for a 12mm lens of 10 to 12 feet, and that will fall within that range. However, if the plates are going to be passing farther away, such as 50 feet, we can see that this is very much outside the range of the 12mm lens, and we should be using a 35mm lens instead, which has an in-focus range of 45 to 64 feet. So when I'm talking about an in-focus range, anything past 64 feet won't really be read very well, and anything below 45 is going to be a little too out of focus as well. So it really is, you want to take a look and make sure we've got the right range for the where the plate is passing within the view. Now, if you want more information on the Sharp camera specifications, you can take a look at the Genetec website, so not the GTAP, but actually genetec.com. Take a look under Solutions, then go under the Resources section here. You can click on Brochures and Data Sheets, and there's a few different documents there that can help you out with your choice there. I also recommend taking a look at the AutoVu handbook, which is available on the GTAP, and that contains links to the spec sheets as well. So you see within there we've got the two links, and that'll bring you right to the documents that you need. The handbook is very important and should be kept with you whenever you're setting up a new system. In the webinar today, we're looking at setting up a basic configuration, but the handbook also contains some extra material on some more advanced settings and procedures, such as setting up a Sharp to use an FTP connection, or modifying the matcher settings to allow additional plate character differences. Also to be found in the handbook are the safety precautions to take when we're setting up a new system, particularly with the hardware. It applies a little bit more to the patroller when you're connecting the Sharp to a vehicle, but it's very good to read if anytime you're using any kind of electrical connections. You really should take a look at the precautions in there. Now, one other thing to look into before we get everything going are the network ports. Since we're just using fixed Sharps in this example, we need to make sure the LPR Manager has the following sets of ports open. This can be found in the Security Center Installation and Upgrade Guide. Now, if we're using a mobile system, there's a much larger group of ports that need to be open for the patroller application as well. Now, we're going to see a little bit later on there are some other ports that need to be open, and those are going to be used for the Sharp units. We'll see where we can find out those port numbers a little bit later on. Alright, so once you've done your site survey and you've done all the pre-installation steps, we can take a look at installing the hardware. The first thing I like to do is explain the difference between the basic Sharp systems so you know which one you want to order. Now the terminology can get a little confusing when you say it verbally, but bear with me and you'll see the differences in the examples here. So there are basically two kinds of Sharp systems: the standalone Sharp camera unit, like these two right here, and the Sharp X system. Now when we just say Sharp, we are usually referring to the standalone Sharp camera like this one here. And this is actually the one that you'll find most commonly used for fixed installations. Now for the standalone units, there are three kinds of models that you'll see. The first one is the Sharp XGA, which uses a high definition LPR camera that can capture images in 1024 by 768 resolution. And as well, we also have the Sharp VGA, which is the same model as the XGA, only the LPR camera uses a standard definition of 640 by 480. Now the one below here is the Sharp EX, which stands for external, and it shouldn't be confused with the Sharp X here. So basically the unit has the same internal components as the fixed Sharp here, but it doesn't have any cameras or illumination board. You can see basically that part in the front here has been cut off. So instead we have two ports in the front that can support external NTSC or PAL cameras for the LPR and the context images. The Sharp X system down the bottom here is a little different, as there are the cameras used for capturing images, and we also have a separate processing unit that analyzes the LPR data that comes from the cameras themselves. The processing unit can come with multiple processors that operate independently from each other to give the best performance for the connected cameras. In terms of the camera component of the Sharp X system, we have XGA and VGA models as well, which are some of the smallest in the industry actually. And the LPR cameras capture images at either 1024 by 946 and 640 by 480 for the XGA and VGA respectively. In a fixed environment, the only real downside to using a Sharp X system like this would be you'd have to find somewhere safe to put the processing unit as well, and it can't be too far from the actual cameras. There is a cable length limit there. Now in both systems the cameras can be ordered with different illuminators. We saw that a little earlier what the illuminations were, and that can really help the plate visibility depending on what state or country the plate is from and what type of reflective paint is used on the plate. The light spectrum for the illumination boards goes from visible amber light and all the way to infrared frequencies. Now depending on the environment and what kind of lighting conditions exist, one illumination board might be preferable over another. The boards do have a fixed frequency though, so this is something that needs to be determined before you order the units. Once you have received the system with the lens and the illumination that you ordered, the next step would be to set up the hardware. Now you should receive a document with your system titled How to Power Up and Connect Your Sharp, or Sharp X, depending on whichever one you ordered. Now you can get the full details on setting up the unit from this document or from the AutoVu handbook as well, but we're going to have a quick look at the basic steps here in connecting a regular Sharp unit. Now the cable that comes with the Sharp is divided into several wires for your power, for your grounding, there's the grounding there, for common use, and you also of course have your Ethernet cable here as well. We do have several cable lengths available that you can order, and you can actually shorten the wires if you need to, but you should never try to extend the wire. Now for the Ethernet connection, if you need to crimp a new wire, you can find the wiring configuration, which is basically this one, in either one of the guides. They have that available. So here's a diagram of how the wires are connected for the Sharp system, and an example of how it would look in an enclosure where we do have a power supply, and we have an Ethernet switch up here as well. The cable coming from the Sharp is coming in on the right side underneath here, and the left side here is going to the power connections and to the network as well. Now please make sure you're using adequate fuses and surge protection for the power and the network connections. And the equipment that you're using can withstand the forces of nature that you have going on around the enclosure itself. We recommend using a 24 volt DC power supply for fixed systems, and you're going to need one, a 24 volt one, if your sharp cable is longer than 5 meters or 15 feet. The fuse on the power supply is not needed if you're using the power supply that has been ordered from Genetec. Otherwise, make sure you're using a 10 amp slow blow fuse between the power supply and the sharp cable. Now, the violet wire that we had in the scenario here is really, it's not used in a fixed situation. You can see it right there. So you just need to seal up the end of the wire with heat shrink tubing and electrical tape. So from here you can mount the sharp camera on a pole or wherever you'd planned when doing the site survey, and you can plug the cable into the back of the sharp. Now make sure you put dielectric grease on the threads of the controller and tighten the connector ring onto the sharp. In outdoor conditions like we see here, it would be recommended to use a liquid tight conduit to shield the cable like we have on this one. And don't forget to seal up where the conduit and the connector meets the sharp using weatherproof sealant or tape in order to prevent any damage from the elements. If you're using the Sharp EX, the procedure is very similar, and only you'll need to connect the cameras to the front of the Sharp and make sure they're properly sealed and shielded as well. The Sharp EX unit will need to have proper ventilation. Sorry, this is a wrong picture. Let's go back to this one. So the Sharp EX is going to need proper ventilation if you do place it in an enclosure and place the cameras outside of it, and the cameras will require their own power source. Now we're looking at the Sharp X. Now that can be used as well, but this is, like I mentioned, a less common solution, and the wiring is a little more involved due to having a separate processing unit, which we would need to keep in an enclosure near the cameras. Now we're going to go over the mobile setup next month, so we'll take a look at the Sharp X wiring then. I just wanted to give a brief diagram here to see what you're looking at on the back of the Sharp X unit. So really the only difference if you're using the Sharp X in a fixed system versus the mobile is that the processing unit isn't going to connect to the in-vehicle computer, but this is going to go right to your IP network instead. So after you have the hardware set up, you can go ahead and install your security center system if it hasn't been installed already. Like I mentioned, we're not going to go over that step as we do have a couple of detailed webinars on the setup and installation of a security center system, and of course we've got some documents on the GTAP for this as well, like the administrator guide, and for installation we've got the installation and upgrade guide. Alright, now that we have the hardware connected and powered up, our next step is to perform a few configuration steps on the Sharp units to get them to connect to our security center system. To configure a Sharp unit, we use the Sharp portal. We can access this using the IP address of the unit /portal from a web browser. The default password to log in is Genetec, but we do recommend changing this password as soon as possible from the change password link, which is from the status page on the portal. So basically as soon as you log in, you'll be in the status page. You just go ahead and change that right here. To make sure everything is working, you can go to the live feed tab right up on top here, and you can choose the context camera in the camera selection drop down menu right here. We can also use this to align the Sharp or Sharp X camera and make sure it's pointing in the right direction. Next we need to go to the configuration tab. It's the second tab in the portal, and we need to take a look at the network settings section here. This is pretty small, so I just highlighted it and blew it up, and we're going to see that for the other sections here as well. So in the network settings, we need to set the mode to either DHCP or static. And if we do set it to static, it's going to have the extra fields here, and we can put in the IP address, the mask, and the gateway as well. Under the camera settings section here, we need to set the information based on the cameras that we're using, so basically the camera type. The information that you do see here will change depending on the model of the Sharp system you're using. So for instance, in this case we're using a standalone Sharp unit, or basic Sharp, and it's only going to ask if we want to configure high definition context images, which are basically double the pixels of normal context images. For a Sharp EX, it will ask for the video format, which would be either NTSC or PAL, and the capture mode, telling it what the cameras are attached to, what the ports are doing for the attached cameras, basically. A Sharp X can have 2 single board controllers to be able to process more than one camera per processing unit, and each one runs independently of the other with separate portal screens. You'll see 2 interfaces per single board controller, and you'll need to specify the model, the LPR resolution, and if you want to capture high definition context images for the cameras attached to that single board controller. Now if you want to switch to the other single board controller on the processing unit, you need to go back to the status tab, and under the actions section there's a button that says configure the other unit, and that's basically going to bring up the portal for the second single board controller. If you need more information on what the settings mean and what they can do, just take a look in the AutoVu handbook, and it'll give you a bit more information on the configuration and what each field in the camera options means. Okay, the next section here is really important, and that's the analytics section. So from here we have to specify the context, which is basically what state or country or region the plates are from, and the read strategy, which tells the camera how often to look for a new plate. So if you find you're getting too many misread plates or you're getting too many duplicate reads, try changing the read strategy right here from slow to fast, or vice versa. Generally, if you're reading plates on vehicles that are traveling 55 miles per hour or higher, you should be using the fast moving vehicle option. If you have the camera set up at a gate and you have vehicles that are pulling up and stopping in front of it, you should use the slow moving vehicle option, which will take less images, but it's going to try a little bit more to try to get an accurate read from those images, and won't give you as many duplicate reads as you might get with the fast option. Now in between these two scenarios, you might need to do some testing to see which one gives you the best results. Now the context here is very important because all the data pertaining to how a plate is read from a particular location is stored in the system, and the variables are selected based on the context here. So if we choose the wrong context, the camera may not know how to process the plate correctly, and your reading accuracy may not be very efficient. We also have some options that we can enable below here if we want to read the state that the plate is from, if we want to look for the make of the vehicle, and there's other options that may be usable for your situation. Now one important one to check for a fixed Sharp camera is optimize for fixed installation, the last one right on the bottom here. Now what that's going to do is analyze the images to try to find a region of interest, and it's going to decrease your false positives that come in. Now the last part that we can see down here is the extension section. Now for fixed Sharp cameras, we should have Security Center selected, and either Auto for version 5.2 and later, or choose the previous version of Security Center to use. Now this option here, Connect to Security Center, we really recommend not having that option checked, as it limits the communication between the Sharp and Security Center to only being established by the Sharp unit. So in cases where you have the LPR Manager that is unable to automatically discover the units, You can try to check this option and specify the IP address of the server, but generally it's best just to leave that unchecked for normal operation. Now we're going to look at the LPR Manager role next, but one important thing that is here is the discovery port on the sharp right here. We need to make sure that this one here matches exactly the one that we have set up on the LPR Manager role that we want to associate the sharp with, because we can have multiple LPR Manager roles. Now if you want to do automatic updates on the unit, make note of the update provider port right here on the bottom as well, as we'll have to make sure that that one's set up the same in the LPR Manager role as well. Now of course it would be a good idea to make note of all these ports, as they should be open on any firewalls between the sharp unit and Security Center. So the only thing left really here to look at is if we want to encrypt communication to the sharp portal. So if we want to do that, look under Portal Security, and we can click on the Use HTTPS radio button right here. Now you'll need to use HTTPS in the URL to connect to the portal, but before that'll take effect, you're going to need to reboot the unit, the whole sharp unit, to get that to kick in. Okay, so now that the sharp units are set up, we can go into Security Center and look at the LPR Manager role and add the sharps to the system. Once we connect to the config tool and we open the LPR task that we've done here, we should see a default LPR Manager role created under the Roles and Units section by default right here. Now if you don't have this, take a look in your license, so you can go to the home page and go under About, and make sure that you do have the AutoVu component included in your license. If you need to create an additional role, add an LPR Manager using the Add an Entity button from the bottom of the LPR task screen. Now choose the server to host the new manager, or the new LPR Manager role, and then click on Next to enter the specific information for the role. The data server and the database are pretty straightforward here, but the two ports below it here are very important. So we just looked at the ports on a sharp unit, and the discovery port here must match the one we've set up with the sharps, as we mentioned, and this is going to allow the LPR Manager to automatically discover the unit on the system. If you have multiple LPR Managers, make sure each one uses a different discovery port. We can also set the listening port, which tells the LPR Manager which port to pay attention to for any incoming connection requests from the sharp units. Now the rest of the creation process here for creating the LPR Manager role is very similar to any role creation in Security Center, so including the name of the role and the partition it goes in. So I'm just going to skip over that to save some time here. Now if you're using the default LPR Manager role, or you create a new one, there's a few configuration settings that we're going to want to verify next. Once we select the LPR Manager and go into the Properties tab that we have up here, the first thing we want to look at are the general settings. The first thing to set here is the root folder. Now this is the main folder that holds all the information for the entities the LPR Manager is controlling. This folder should be unique for each LPR Manager. So by default, the root folder is created on the server under C, Genetec, AutoVu, and root folder. So if we created a new LPR Manager on the same server, we would need to call the root folder something different, but preferably still leave it under the AutoVu folder, just for simplicity's sake. The other important section on this page is for the retention periods. Now by default, this is I just blew this up from the bottom of the general settings. By default, these are set to 90 days, but depending on the database size and the number of reads we are getting per day, we might fill up the database before this. So by default, Security Center comes with SQL Server Express 2008 R2, which has a 10 gigabyte database size limit. Now, a conservative estimate of a read that's stored on the database is about 84 kilobytes. So using the number of kilobytes per read times the number of estimated reads per day, we can figure out how much database space we're using in a day, and we can find out how much we can fit into the 10 gigabyte database. So once we figure out the number of days to retain the data, we can change the retention periods here to reflect that. Now this is really important because the database, the way it works, it's not cleaned up when it's full. So the system will just stop writing until the space clears up, which is only after the oldest reads pass their retention period and are deleted. So just to give you a basic example, if we know we can hold 20 days of reads in the database, but we have the retention period set to 25 days, then basically the system will stop writing reads in the database for 5 days until the oldest ones in there pass their 25th day and are automatically cleaned up based on the retention period. Okay, so once we've set those up, we can take a look at the live section next, which is the second one here. Now if we need to change the discovery port or the listening port, we can do that right from here. We can also choose which images can be sent to Security Center on a read, either the LPR image or the context camera image, or we can just check both of them right here as well. Now this is also going to affect how much information is stored on the database and how many reads the database can hold. So the conservative estimate we used above includes all the information in a read. The last section we're going to look at here is for matching. Now this is turned off by default, but we absolutely need this option on for fixed AutoVu systems if we're going to be looking at hot lists and actually want to get plate hits. So turning this on right here in the column will tell Security Center to process the incoming reads and look for any hits in the hot lists, which we're going to set up in the next section actually. Now if you're not going to be using the AutoVu system to search for any plates in the hot lists, you can leave the matching option turned off, and you can basically use it to only monitor the reads of passing vehicles in the security desk. So that's about it for the LPR Manager role. So once we have that set up, we can take a look for any cameras that are on the system. Now by default, if there are any sharps on the network that have the same discovery port, they will be automatically picked up by the LPR Manager, and they should appear under the LPR Manager in the tree in the roles and units section. So if a camera is not added automatically, we can basically add it manually as well. So that's another option. So we just need to add an entity, choose LPR unit. We just need to fill in the required information like we have here. So basically we need to give it a name, we need the IP address of the Sharp camera and the port that it's using, and we select which LPR Manager to put it under if we do have multiple ones on the system. Similar to a regular video camera, it will try to discover the unit, go through a discovery process, and then once it's finished you should see it show up under the LPR Manager in the tree. In this case we called it Fixed Sharp, and you can see that it's showing up under our basic LPR Manager that we have. I mentioned this previously, we can also add the context camera to the logical view. So basically it can be viewed in a tile just like any other video unit. So to do this we need to open a video task, and we need to add a video unit entity. We're going to get this dialog box pop up here. So for the manufacturer we want to pick AutoVu. Choose all for the product type, we don't need to specify anything there. And then just put the IP address of the Sharp. The default login is used for authentication, there's nothing we need to change there. And then we just need to hit add or add and close, and it'll add the unit to the archiver using the name of the Sharp, just like we have here. Here's our basic archiver. This is the Sharp unit, and this camera here can be viewed in a tile just like any other video unit, or pulled up on an event action, anything like that we want to do. Now of course we need to make sure we have port 80 open for the video to get from the camera to Security Center. And we also have to have the Omnicast component installed in the license. Since basically we're adding this as any other video unit, if you don't have the Omnicast component, this won't function. Alright, we have one more thing we need to do with the Sharp camera entity, and that's to set up the time zone and the geographic location if needed. So we do that from the Location tab of the Sharp entity in the LPR task. The last thing we want to take a look at is to make sure the software on the Sharp is up to date. You can also use this procedure in the future to apply any new service packs or hotfixes. So depending on the model of the Sharp you're using, you can either push the updates to the Sharp using the Config Tools Updater service, or you can copy the files manually to the Sharp units. So for fixed installations, the updates will be applied automatically after they've been received from the Security Center system. Just a couple of exceptions here. If you do have a standalone Sharp unit that has 512 megabytes of RAM, you should really stay on the 5.1 version of the plate reader software, or lower. And if you have the 1 gigabyte of RAM Sharp unit or higher, you can upgrade to the latest plate reader software. Now if you would like to upgrade the Sharp manually, please take a look at the handbook to see what's involved. There's a few steps there, and I think it would really be a good idea to give one of our support guys a call to see if the update is recommended for your unit, and to get any assistance with the update as well. So to use the updater service, you first need to download the update. These will be available on the GTAP at some point in the System Management section under Product Download, and as well you can contact the support department for the updates as well, and they can give you the correct version that you need. Once you have that file, open the config tool on your server that's hosting the LPR Manager role. From the config tool, the first time that we use this service, we need to activate the feature. So this is turned off by default, the update provider. And we also need to make sure we have the listening port set correctly here as well. So from here, open an LPR task, and under the roles and units, choose the LPR Manager you'll be using for the fixed system. And then go to the LPR Manager's Properties tab, like we mentioned, and turn this to on, set the port, and apply it. You're good to go here. Once you apply the changes, Security Center will create an updates folder in the LPR root folder on the server. So you can see here's our path for our root folder that we set before, and we have our new updates folder. Now still in the LPR task, got that open up here. We need to go under the general settings section on top here, and go to updates on the left. On the bottom of the updates section, choose which component you wish to upgrade, such as the patrollers and Sharp units, or you can do the update services or a firmware upgrade as well. Now we have our list of Sharps here. So next to the added Sharp units, we have a folder icon here called a drop folder. So if you hover over this icon, it's going to give you the actual path of the drop folder. If you click on it, it's actually going to open a Windows Explorer window to the correct location. So it's not actually asking for a file in that case, it's just opening a Windows Explorer so that you can just copy the files or drag and drop the update file right into that folder from there. It's actually quite convenient. Once the LPR Manager sees the file that's in there, it's going to unzip the contents to the right location, and it's going to change the extension of the file to .processed. Now once we're back in our Updates tab here, we're going to see that the an Update button next to the Sharp camera. If you have multiple ones, you're going to have an Update All button as well. So just click on that to push the updates to the unit. So once that's done, like in this case here, you're going to see that the status will say up to date, so you know that it's been applied correctly. Okay, so the last configuration section we're going to look at are the hotlists. These are the lists of plates that will be used by Security Center to see if any reads come up as hits and should be acted upon by the system. If you're only using the Sharp for reading purposes and viewing the incoming plates, you really don't need hotlists, but most systems will use them for some purpose or another. As we've mentioned, hotlists are the list of plates that we're looking for. We have a sample, very small hotlist file right here. Now this is usually used for identifying plates of stolen cars, people with unpaid tickets, and things like that. But we can also use them for gate control, where a plate match means the gate will be opened. The sources of the plates usually depends on the use. So if we're looking for stolen vehicles, we would probably get the list of plates from a law enforcement agency. For a gate control hotlist, we could either generate the file ourselves like this manually, or we could generate a list of plates from a list of tenants for a building, or even if it's a company, we could get it from our human resources records. Now a hotlist must be in a text or CSV or comma separated value type of file. So if you open it in Excel, make sure you're saving it as a CSV. And at the very least must contain the plate number and the state that the plate is from. So in our example here, our first column is the plate number and our third column is the state. So to create a hotlist, we just need to open an LPR task and go to the hotlists section right here. We just need to click on the add button on the bottom to create the list, and it's going to just bring it up right in the window. There's no dialog box that pops up. So from here you just need to type in a name to give the entity in the list here. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the properties of that list. So from the hotlist properties, we can set up several options and settings here. The first one up top here is the priority. So in case there are two hotlists with the same plate and we get a hit from both lists at the same time, this is going to determine which one takes priority and will be displayed first. 0 is the highest priority. You can set it from 0 to 100. Now next we need to specify the path where the hotlist file is found. This can be a network path or a local path. So we can have a file on another server that's being kept up to date by an external system, such as the law enforcement system if they provide that service. So for a network path, we need to specify the username and password down here. That's so that we can access the network that the file is on. And there are two kinds of files that we can read for hotlists. Delimited, which basically means that there's a character used to represent the end of a field, or fixed length, where the fields are in columns that always have the same fixed number of characters. In our previous example, we were looking at the file there. That was a delimited file, so it was being separated by a comma for each field. Let me just flip back to that for a second. So you can see this is designating where the end of our field is. In case there's any difference in the length of fields, this is very handy to use. So if we're using a delimited file like we just saw, we need to specify what character is used to separate the fields. So in this case, we've got it set as a semicolon, but our file actually uses a comma, so I'd want to change that value right here. Now if you're using a tab, that can be used, but you need to make sure there's only one tab being used at a time to separate the values. So you can't keep tabbing over to make sure they all line up nice in the file. We need to make sure there's only one there at a time. Now we also want to specify if we want this file to be editable from the hotlist and permit editor task. The bottom section here as well is for the attributes or the fields that are used in the hotlist file. So this is actually the really important section down here. So these must be in the same order as the fields that we used in the file. You can also add new ones if you want, just clicking on the Add button here. If you don't need any, you can highlight them and hit Delete. If you want to change the order, just highlight a field and just use the arrows on the side to change that. So in the case of the file that I wanted to import, the one that I created, I noted that the plate state or the plate number was first, so I would click on this and bump it up to the top one on the list. I had my category next, and my third option would be the plate state. Now if you need a full description of the fields that are selectable here and their descriptions, just take a look in the AutoVu handbook, and that's fully detailed there. Now the next section we want to take a look at is the advanced one up here, the advanced tab. So we click on that, we get a few different options here. So the first thing we can set here is our color, and this is associated specifically with this hot list, so that when you get a hit that comes up in the security desk, we can easily see which hot list it belongs to by the tile background color. Now we can choose to have a hot list that only contains partial plates, and for that we use wildcards to replace the missing characters, with a limit of two wildcards per hot list. So if you're using this kind of file, you need to make sure the Use Wildcards option is set to On. And we should only have one wildcard hot list per LPR Manager in the system. And as a best practice, it would really be a good idea to keep the size of the file to below 100 entries or entities. Now below that here we have the covert option, and this is enabled to so that you can basically not display the hits in the usual manner in the security desk. So if you don't want to alert everybody that a hit has been made, but you do want to record it anyways in the system, you want to turn the covert option on. And that way only users with higher privileges can view the hits or the hit information in reports. If you specify an email address here, any hits will be mailed to this address, as long as you have the SMTP server properly configured in the server admin for that server. The rest of the options here are pretty much only for the Patroller application, so we're going to look at that in the next webinar. So if we want to tell the LPR Manager which hotlist to use, we need to go to the Properties tab of the LPR Manager role, which we've seen this quite a bit, and we need to go under the File Association tab here and check the hotlist to use. So under here, once we've created a bunch of hotlists, we can check the ones that we want to use for this particular LPR Manager role. And in this example, don't worry about the permits next to it. That's something we're going to look at in the mobile webinar. So of course, once this has all been configured, and we need to turn the matching on, in this example we still have that turned off. We want to make sure that's enabled. We should see the reads coming up in our security desk now, and if any of the plates match one of the hot lists, it's going to bring that up in the tile and let you know. This is of course something that relates to an event, so you can configure event to actions based on the hits. And for that you could trigger alarms, you could open a gate using zones, you could notify other security desk users, and you could do other similar actions like that. Alright, so we're going to take a look at some troubleshooting steps now. We're going to go over this pretty briefly, and we've thrown in a couple of useful tips in there as well. Now the first problem I want to take a look at is if you get no results on your read reports. Now when we were setting up the retention periods, we mentioned the 10 gigabyte database limit for the basic SQL server that's installed. So take a look in the event logs in Windows to see if there are any SQL errors that point to a full database. They should be pretty obvious in there. And in that case, you'll need to reduce the retention period to make sure the database has enough room to stay empty or not empty, but enough room to record new reads and new hits and new information. Next, if you can ping your Sharp on the network and it is online, you may hit a situation, but you're not getting any reads coming up. So in that case, open a remote desktop session to the Sharp, And just take a look and make sure that all of your services are running here. So we've got the 4 major ones here and the HAL as well, which is also very important. And just make sure they all have started next to them. Now we see a lot of cases where the network ports turn out to be the issue in the end, such as for not getting reads or hits in Security Center. So when we're setting up the system, make sure that all the ports used by the LPR Manager and all the ports on the Sharp configuration page are unblocked on any firewalls that are affecting the network, and set up any exceptions that you need to as well. Now, speaking of the network, if you're having any trouble seeing a Sharp on the network, you can get to it to the portal or to a remote desktop session through an alternate IP address. So you just need to set your PC to have a 192.168.10. Whatever IP address, and connect it to the Sharp network cable. So if you're using a Sharp camera, the default address is 192.168.10.100. For a Sharp X, the default address is 192.168.10.1 for the first single board controller, and .2 for the second single board controller. If you do have a trunk unit with multiple single board controllers. Of course, when you're setting your IP address in your PC, make sure you don't set it to any of these addresses here. And the Sharp X also uses a 9 address range after this. So if you're using the Sharp X's, pick anything .10 or higher, basically. Now, if you're getting bad reads, such as bad plate images, or the unit is not pulling the right data from the plate, take a look at the Sharp position and the lens. So you need to make sure the Sharp is at a good angle, is the lens appropriate for the distance to the plate, and also take a look and see if the front of the Sharp is dirty. The protective plexiglass might need cleaning once in a while, which is something you should take into consideration when deciding on where to mount the units as well. Another problem to take a look at is if you're not getting images when you're running your reports. So you might see that the data is there, but there's no read or hit images. This may be a problem related to a Windows update that's not needed by the system to operate. So take a look in the installed programs and features in your Windows server for KB2670838. And if you do find it there, then just go ahead and uninstall it. It's really not used by anything else in the system, and doesn't need to be there for an AutoVu system. If you see the clock is not syncing from the status tab of the Sharp portal, take a look at port 4546 to make sure it's unblocked. Now I just want to note that the time on the camera is intentionally in the UTC time zone. So please don't modify the time or the time zone on the Sharp directly, or the timestamps may not be accurate. Now here's a tip when you're using the remote desktop session. We should never be logging off or disconnecting from a remote desktop session connected to a Sharp, but we can just go ahead and close it. The Sharp does need to be logged on to Windows and running to work properly. Another quick tip related to the camera, if you do need to make a support call that's related to the hardware, please make sure you have the Sharp serial number ready in case we do need to make an RMA request for the unit. The serial number needs to come from the sticker on the physical unit, which may not be the same thing as the one you see from the portal. So don't trust the portal one, take a look at the actual unit and pull the serial number from there. Now, one last troubleshooting point. We brought this up previously. I just wanted to drive it home there. If the reads are coming into the system and you're expecting hits and you know a plate pass that's on one of your hot lists, but it's not coming up, then make sure the hot lists were imported properly. You can take a look in the hot list section for that. And make sure the matching is turned on in the LPR Manager that is controlling the Sharp unit. Alright, so that's the end of the webinar for today. We're going to leave the session active for about another 10 minutes or so in case you do have any additional questions for Patrick, Patrice, or myself. Now, in case you do need to review the webinar, or if you know somebody who would like to watch it, we're going to have it posted on the video section of the GTAP in the next couple of days, so probably either today or tomorrow. If you do have any comments or feedback on the webinar, we'd love to hear them. When you close the webinar session, you're going to be presented with a few quick survey questions, just basically to see how you liked it, what we did right, what we did wrong, and we would really appreciate it if you just take a minute to drop a few comments in there. It really does help us, and we do pay very close attention to those. If you do think of anything else you'd like to ask, any questions based on the webinar content, or have any other comments about the GTAC Tech Talk series or the webinar itself, you can post those in the GTAC Tech Talk section of the GTAP forum. Now, we're also going to have the general questions and answers from today's webinar, as well as links to the videos, posted in the forum very soon. And we're also going to have a link to a PDF file of the slides that we used today. So that's going to be up there again. Like I said, either today or tomorrow. We'll have it up before the weekend, so be good for everybody that needs it there. So that does it for today. Like I said, we're going to leave the session active. I'll give you a little warning when we're about to shut it down. But on behalf of myself and everyone at the Genetec Technical Assistance Center, I'd like to thank you very much for attending the webinar today, and we hope you all have a great day. Thank you.